This is Graphing Parabolas Part 2. We're going to try to put together the two pieces of information we had in Graphing Parabolas Part 1 to give you the whole equation. Take a look at this equation, enter it into the graphing calculator, gives me this parabola. Name the vertex. The vertex is right here. That is the point over 1 up 2. Can you look at the equation and see where the 1 and the 2 come from? I hope so. This 1 right here is that. Now, pay attention to something. That actually says -1, but what we do, we change the sign. That 2 on the outside is right there. So I think about this as just looking at it in this form. Change the sign, don't change the sign. Axis of symmetry comes directly from the vertex. It will be x equals 1. You can tell looking at it that it opens up. Hopefully you also know, because this is a positive here, that it opens up. The domain is our usual -infinity to infinity. The range, the lowest y value is 2, and then it goes up to infinity. So our range is 2 to infinity with a square bracket on 2 and a curved parenthesis on an infinity. Take a look at this one. See if we can look at this from the standpoint of the equation first and then verify it with the graph. That says +3, so the first part of the vertex needs to be -3, followed by -1. Axis of symmetry is x equals -3, that number right there. According to this, because this is positive, it should open up. Now let's check those things on the graph. Here's our vertex right here, and what is that point? That's -3, down 1, that's that point right there. Our axis of symmetry will go right through the middle there, and it does open up. The domain is our usual right there. I'm not going to rewrite it every time. The range, the lowest y value is -1, and it goes up through infinity. Curved parenthesis here, square bracket there. This is the general form we're dealing with now. Y equals parentheses x minus h squared plus k. The vertex is hk, inside the parenthesis, comma, outside the parentheses. Notice this says x minus, so that in the vertex it's h. That's telling you to change the sign. The axis of symmetry is x equals h. Whatever that number is, goes right there. It opens up if there's no negative in front of the parentheses. It opens down if there is a negative. Your domain on all of these is all real numbers, or you can write it in interval notation, -infinity to infinity. Your range depends on how it is oriented. If it's facing up, your range is always the k value, comma, infinity. Whatever the k value is, comma, infinity, if it's facing up. If it's upside down, your range is -infinity, k. So let's see if we can look at this without the graph in front of us. The vertex has to be what's inside the parentheses, what's outside the parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we change the sign, makes this 4, comma, 3. Axis of symmetry automatically is x equals 4. This is a positive, so it opens up. The domain is our usual, -infinity to infinity. And the range, without looking at the graph, we're going to use our idea that this is facing up. So our range has got to be the k value, which was 3, and then going on up to infinity. If you don't like doing that, when we finally put it together with the graph, you can always name your range directly from the graph. Vertex here, it's got to be what's inside the parenthesis, comma, what's outside the parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis is 2, but we change the sign to -2. Outside is -4. Axis of symmetry is x equals -2. That is a positive. It opens up. Domain is the usual right there. The range, because this is facing up, our range is our k value, which is -4, comma, infinity. The real standard form has got a number in front of parentheses. We have not looked at any of those yet. So standard form of a parabola is y equals a times parentheses x minus h squared plus k. The vertex is hk. That's what I keep calling inside, comma, outside. Axis of symmetry, x equals h. It will open up if a is positive and down if a is negative. We've said all of that before. But a is really called the amplitude, and what that refers to is how fat or skinny the parabola is. So let's take a look at some graphs. The green right here is my regular y equals x squared. This red line is y equals 2x squared. And this inside one that's a little darker is y equals 4x squared. Notice as this number gets bigger, the parabola gets skinnier. Also, I drew one with a negative to remind you that the negative is what turns it upside down. But this -2x squared also is going to be skinnier. So not only is it upside down, it's skinnier. Here's the rule. If a is greater than the absolute value of 1, whether it's positive or negative, then the parabola gets skinnier. Basically, you can think whole number or integer makes it get skinnier. And of course, if a is negative, the parabola is upside down. On the other hand, if we're dealing with a fraction, here was my original y equals x squared. This is y equals 1/2 x squared. And look what happened. The parabola got fatter. So if a is less than the absolute value of 1, basically we're talking fraction, then the parabola gets fatter. Think f for fraction with f for fatter if you want. So let's take a look at a chart where we can just name some things before we actually graph. Y equals x squared. If we look up in here, there's no parentheses, so the first part of the vertex has to be 0. There's nothing after the squared, so the second part has to be 0. Axis of symmetry is automatically x equals 0. Because this is a positive x squared, it opens up. And as far as fat or skinny on this one, this is just our standard 1x squared, so it's neither fat nor skinny. This is just your regular parabola. Y equals x squared plus 5. There are no parentheses, so if there's no parentheses, the first part of the vertex is 0, comma, what comes after the squared, which is 5. Axis of symmetry, x equals 0. Because this is a positive x squared, it opens up. As far as fat and skinny, this is a 1, so it is neither fat nor skinny. I'll just use that. Here we're finally looking more like the form. X plus 4 squared, that's inside the parentheses. Change the sign, -4, comma, -1, which is going to make our axis of symmetry x equals that first number, which is -4. Because this is a positive in front of the parentheses, it opens up, and we're still talking neither fat nor skinny. Take a look at this one. You might want to put this as a plus a 0 so that it fits this format perfectly. Vertex is going to be what's inside the parentheses with a sign change, comma, what's outside the parentheses. Axis of symmetry, x equals that number that's in the front. That is a positive number, so it opens up. And we do have a number here this time. That's 4. That is a value that is greater than 1. That means this is going to be a bit skinnier. With this one, take a look at your inside parentheses that says x minus 5. So the first part of the vertex is positive 5, comma, -2. Axis is x equals 5. Because this is a negative value in front of the parentheses, we know this opens down. But because this absolute value is greater than 1, it is also skinny. So it's upside down and skinny. This one, vertex of -3, -1. Axis of symmetry, x equals -3. Because this is negative, it opens down. And because that's really like a -1, it's neither fat nor skinny. To graph a parabola by hand, first you want to find the vertex, and then you're going to make a t-chart using the next integer less than and the next integer greater than the x value of the vertex. Sounds complicated, but it really is not. Name your vertex based on what we just learned previously. We know the vertex has to be an ordered pair. It is something from inside the parenthesis with a sign change, so this goes to +1, comma 3. That is my vertex, over 1, up 3. That's an important point. Just looking at this, what whole number is immediately less than 1? 0. What whole number is immediately on the other side of 1? 2. So we want to take these numbers and plug them into this equation and do the arithmetic. If you put a 0 in here, 0 minus 1 is -1. -1 squared is 1. All of this turns into 1. So this is just 2 times 1 plus 3, which gives me 5. If I do the same arithmetic here and put a +2 here, 2 minus 1 is still 1, squared is 1. Then 2 times 1 plus 3 is 5. These two values better be the same number because our parabola is symmetrical. All I have to do is graph the point over 0 up 5, graph the point over 2 up 5, those dots with a curve, and that's your parabola.